Chat, do you remember the Kari Lake story from recently, in which Kari Lake exposed through recording the head of the Arizona Republican Party basically offering her a bribe, pretty clearly a bribe, for her to leave politics for 2 years on the behalf of Republicans in DC. So corruption that goes right the way to the top. That leak, by the way, is still probably bigger than Watergate. Just so you know, it's just a small part of the culture, which is a small part of all the corruption that we've already found. That happened, right? And you may think, man, that was major, that was big, that was important, and it was. But and the consequences were severe, but small, isolated to one individual. They should have gone further, but it's a great. That was the direct effects. The indirect effects are it's a paradigm shift. It's putting on notice our enemies, who will now be much more reluctant to use those kinds of strategies and won't try it on Kari Lake either, or pretty much any of the other MAGA people. And so they are going to be less powerful. All of that is arguably actually smaller than what has just happened. Some people have been arguing that it's smaller than what's just happened. I'm not sure if it is, but we'll leave it up to your judgment, chat. Is this story a better example of political corruption than what Kari Lake exposed? Clarence Thomas offered $1 million a year to resign. US Supreme Court Associate Justice Clarence Thomas has been offered $1 million a year and a $2.4 million motor coach if he agrees to resign from the nation's highest court. Comedian John Oliver, host of HBO's Last Week Tonight, made the offer at the end of his show on Sunday and showed off the motor coach he was offering to the Supreme Court's longest-serving member. I didn't know who's longest-serving, actually. Thomas, the most senior member of the court's conservative majority, has previously faced calls to resign or be impeached amid questions about his relationship with billionaire Republican donor Harlan Crow and gifts from other rich acquaintances. Those aren't the reasons that they were trying to impeach him, no. Those were just the pretenses. The reason is that he's based. Newsweek has reached out to Supreme Court via email for comment. Oliver made the offer to Thomas during the premiere of season 11 of Last Week Tonight and said he had spoken to legal experts who told him that making such an offer was not against the law. Now, what I was thinking just now is that he could easily argue that this was just a joke. It's a comedy show. He was just joking. But if he's spoken to legal experts, then it probably wasn't a joke. Unless the premise of speaking to the legal experts was specifically, it is a joke. Is it legal to say if it is a joke? Which, of course, it should be. But it should be clear that it's a joke. I'm not sure that it was. I haven't seen the clip. But if he's making the offer seriously, then that probably shouldn't be legal, because that is no different than a wealthy billionaire with an angle to support making the offer from behind the scenes. Except in this case, it was done publicly, so he's just been caught instantly. It's not better if it's out in the open. For legal reasons, that's a joke. Exactly, Neat Bun. Ginger says that bribery offer has about as much level standing as Dankula being, that is to say, in a court of law, he is fucked. You mean the guy who made this offer? Interesting. Like, it is hard not to see this as a simple bribery offer. If a jury agrees that he was joking, and it was quite clear that he was joking, then I say it is more important to defend the free speech of comedy than it is to prosecute this case of, frankly, it was never going to happen, bribery. Still, though, on principle, if he wasn't joking, then, yeah, even if it wasn't going to happen, that's very bad. Granted, I don't think it's quite as bad as what we saw with Jeff DeWitt that Kari Lake recorded. Although I'm not sure I can exactly explain why. I'm sure I'll come up with something, though. Quote, Clarence Thomas is arguably the most consequential justice on the court right now, and he's never really seemed to like the job, he said. He said it's not worth doing for the grief, so what if he can keep the luxury perks he clearly enjoys without having to endure all of that grief, Oliver said, before revealing what he called a special offer. The offer includes $1 million a year for the rest of your life if you simply agree to leave the Supreme Court immediately and never come back. Oliver also produced a contract that the justice would need to sign in order to agree to the deal, and Oliver said he was offering the money to Thomas himself. It's sounding less and less like a joke at this point. Ginger says, to clarify my previous point, any reasonable person can see that this was intended as satire. However, the courts have proven themselves to be entirely without reason. That may be true, Ginger, but is this satire at this point? Is it? Like, I would usually assume it is, but he's drawn up a contract and everything. I don't know. I don't know. Quote, HBO is not putting up the money for this. I am personally on the hook, he says. You can really make me regret this, he says. I could be doing stand-up tours to pay for your retirement for years, he said. The comedian added, Thomas has exactly 30 days from midnight tonight to make your resignation effective before the offer expires. It doesn't sound like satire, to be honest. Oliver also included a motorhome in the offer worth $2.4 million. It comes with a bedroom featuring a king-size bed, a fireplace, what Oliver described as a residential-sized fridge, and other amenities. The inclusion of a motorhome is a reference to questions raised about a 1999 loan provided to Thomas by Anthony Welters, who made his fortune in the healthcare industry, in order for the justice to purchase a Prevost Marathon Le Mirage XL recreational vehicle. Interesting. Now, I hope that there were no favors exchanged there. It's possible that there weren't. A report from Democrats on the Senate Finance Committee in October said that Thomas had failed to repay a significant portion of the $267,000 loan. It's quite possible that he was simply let off it. It's also quite possible that there was a quid pro quo there. I'm not saying it's impossible. Concluding his offer on Sunday, Oliver said, so that's the offer, $1 million a year and a brand new condo on wheels, and all you have to do in return is sign the contract and get the fuck off the Supreme Court, he said. The comedian urged Thomas to talk it over with your totally best friends in the whole world, a reference to the justice's wife, lawyer, and conservative activist Virginia Ginny Thomas, who has previously been the focus of scrutiny because of conversations she had with then White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows in the weeks following the 2020 election, in which she encouraged him to continue efforts to overturn the results. The clock starts now. 30 days, Clarence. Let's do this, Oliver said. So, chat. Press 1 if you think that this was clearly satire to the extent that it's not a bribe. Press 2 if you think it's clearly a bribe, regardless whether he might have meant it as satire. And press 3 if it was never satire and he meant it as a bribe. Possibly 2, I'm not sure. I suppose, though, what we could do instead is press 5 if you don't think he should be prosecuted for bribery. Press 6 if you think he should be prosecuted for bribery. And try in your answer not to just press 6 because he's unbearable. Can't be 2 if he didn't intend for it to be a bribe. It's not a bribe. Deport him, skip the prosecution. 7 executed for treason, says Nazi. Unless there are signatures from... Well, the thing is, Hunter Zero, you don't need to wait for a bribe to be accepted before you can confirm a bribe offer has been made. The offer itself is bad enough. Executed not for bribery, but for being unfunny, says Dang. Unfunny? I'm not trying to be funny, I'm trying to make a point. Ginger says, I believe he made this offer in the hope that it would get attention and to really hope that it was declined, even though it could quite easily be recognized as legally binding. Yeah, it's a concern. Yeah, I don't know about this. I think I'd have to see the clip, but initially, from what I'm reading here, it doesn't sound like it's unambiguously satirical. It sounds like he drew up a contract. He said some other things that made it sound somewhat serious, and that if it were to happen, if it were to be accepted, obviously Clarence Thomas would be in trouble. But would Oliver fulfill his end of the deal? He probably would have to if the contract was signed. He literally wrote up a contract. But I don't think it would happen. As I said, it would never happen. I don't think Clarence Thomas does not enjoy the Supreme Court. I think that that quote possibly was just a reference to how difficult it is and how much shit he has to deal with from people like whatever the fuck the comedian, quote unquote comedian is. Oliver here is literally banking on Thomas being a more morally upsetting man than he is. Yes, literally banking. The field says the sleazy insinuation of impropriety where a hostile body determined non-existed of this blatant bribe offer really shows the intellectual deficit between today's clapture comedians and giants like Norm Macdonald. I'm not sure what you mean by that. Hostile body determined non-existed. Oh, you mean of Thomas, where the allegation of a bribe? Hmm. Voodoo says it was a bribe formatted in the "what if we kissed under X unless" memes. Yeah, I guess so. Right. Next story.